one thing I think brings so many of us together, and what's been happening these last couple of years, has been the idea of having change. As a matter of fact, somebody won an election with using that slogan, a change. But there's a change that we want that we haven't gotten yet. And I think that's what we're here to talk about. What kind of change do we really want? And what can we agree on so that we're not talking about different things? And to me, it's very important that we understand what conservatism means. To me, to be a conservative means to conserve the good parts of America and to conserve our Constitution. I first got involved in politics in the 1970s because I was very concerned about the financial situation. The Bretton Woods Agreement broke down, the gold standard was cast aside, and I said this will usher in the age of big government. And that came in under a Nixon administration. And since that time we have been struggling. We have been struggling with the conservative message, and we have had bits and pieces of this coming together, but we really haven't had to follow through. We had a revolution of sorts in 1980 with Ronald Reagan. But, and then of course, we had 1994, and we took over the Congress. And that, of course, was very good, and that was designed to limit government. But government kept growing. Also, in the year 2000, we had a remarkable event, something that hadn't happened in more than 40 years. It was probably 50 years, where there was a Republican president, a Republican Congress, a House, and a Republican Senate. But we didn't get the revolution. There was a lot of desire and a lot of pressure by people like you and saying, what we want is limited government. We want balanced budgets. We want our liberties back. You know, and I think what has happened, and I see what our problems are in philosophic terms, not in partisan terms. And I think what happened, especially back in the teens of the last century when Woodrow Wilson was president, that, and those boos are rightly deserved, let me tell you. But I also use this as an opportunity to put a little pressure on conservatives who had some of their views changed at that time. Just think of what Woodrow Wilson stood for. He stood for world government. He wanted a early, United Nations, League of Nations. But it was the conservatives, Republicans that stood up against it. But how often have you heard today, maybe you did, but how many people are saying it's the conservative position to not even belong to the United Nations? 1913 wasn't a very good year. 1913 gave us the income tax, the 16th Amendment, and the IRS. And what's wrong with getting rid of the income tax and the 16th Amendment? I think it'd be a great idea. And of course, I've already taken a very modest position on the monetary system. I do take the position that we should just end the Fed. But there were other things that went on during the Wilson's administration. Our foreign policy changed. I think it was for the negative. His goal was to make the world safe for democracy, and he prodded us into a war that we should have never gotten into. And we, as conservatives, too many conservatives, have accepted this principle that it is our moral and legal constitutional responsibility to engage ourselves and make the world safe for democracy. I don't think it's possible. Matter of fact, if you think back just a short time ago to the year 2000, when George Bush was running, guess what he ran on? And guess what he won on? He was running against an interventionist foreign policy. He was running against Clinton's policy of intervention, nation building, and the policeman of the world. And he was elected on that. There's nothing wrong with being a conservative and come up with a conservative belief in foreign policy where we have a strong national defense and we don't go to war so carelessly. Is not conservative about saying don't go to war unless we go to war properly with a full declaration of war and no other way. Unconstitutional wars cost a lot of money. They undermine our constitutional principles, and as Randolph Bourne said, war is the health of the state. So if you like small government, you need to work hard at having a strong national defense that is not so militant. Personal liberty is the purpose of government, to protect liberty, not to run your personal lives, not to run the economy, and not to pretend that we can tell the world how they ought to live. For those who disagree, I have a few comments because I understand the disagreement. I've been there, and I've been in the service, and I've spent 5 years in the service, and I know all the argument. But the bottom line, eventually, for all conservatives and all constitutionalists will be, how are we going to pay for it? It's driving us to the bankruptcy. We are now spending $1 trillion a year to manage our world empire. We're in 140 countries. We have 700 bases. And quite frankly, have you noticed the debt is exploding? And it's not all because of Medicare. And believe me, we don't have enough conservatives on the Hill to start tinkering with Medicare. They're not going to cut that. So eventually, this country probably won't do what I suggest, that we back off and back down, spend only the money that's constitutional. I've made 2 promises in my district. I will always vote what I have promised. I will and always vote the Constitution, as well as I will not vote for one single penny that isn't paid for, because debt is the monster. Debt is what's going to eat us up, and that is why our economy is on the brink. We haven't had the collapse, and we haven't had the correction. We are on the brink of a financial cataclysmic event, because what we're leading to, because we're spending too much money, we borrow too much. And at the present time, the Chinese have backed off on what they're loaning us. Interest rates are starting to go up. Inflation factors are coming up. Believe me, the next step is a currency crisis, because there will be a rejection of the dollar. The rejection of the dollar is a big, big event. And then your personal liberties are going to be severely threatened, because then we'll usher in people who say, well, just like they have so far, we've had an event. And this is not the Democrats alone. Democrats and Republicans, they said, oh, there's an event. So what we should do is spend more money, stimulate the economy, borrow more money. And still there wouldn't be enough. So what did we do? We go to the Fed and we tell the Fed, print more money. Believe me, it won't last. It's going to end. You can't double the money supply